Eye on Gauteng, brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Economic Development.
Hello and a warm welcome to Eye on Gauteng. I'm Lionel Skink. Thanks for joining us. The inaugural Gauteng ICT Summit, recently held in Johannesburg, brought together international and local ICT experts to discuss how information technology can be leveraged to improve the quality of life for all and ultimately create jobs. The plan is to develop universal access to faster and more cost-effective internet. Indeed, the economic imperative of the internet penetration has already been established. On Eye on Gauteng today, we examine the progress that has been made to date and also what else needs to happen in order to ensure internet for all. But before I introduce my guests, let's take a look at this insert produced by Ayanda Sowazi.
Recently, the GPG ICT Summit was held to talk about the province's ambitions to improve broadband and internet connectivity province-wide. In attendance were some of the country's greatest minds from government and the private sector. Even on a national level, government has put in place plans to make sure that broadband becomes a basic human right.
Data is the future, and therefore that is why it's important for government and the private sector to roll out broadband so that we can then increase the access to internet services for every person in South Africa.
As far as practical solutions go, Johannesburg is the only city to lay the foundations for broadband infrastructure that will make it to Africa's only fully wired city. In the meantime, government has come up with a smart solution to make sure that the lack of broadband does not hinder the future generations in their aim to keep up with today's technologically advanced world. The Cloudseed data center in Midrand is the nerve center of a system that connects over 1,600 schools today.
On a daily basis, we service 700 million internet requests. About 600 schools will be connected more.
Mpilisweni Secondary School is one of 1,600 schools that have been linked to the e-learning program. Lab coordinator Mr. Mavuso says the students are benefiting greatly from it.
E-learning is about the use of computer technology to enable learners to be able to study at any time. So even at home, during lunch and so on. That's e-learning. The other thing you see in other schools whereby they are having high-tech, we find that they are producing good results. But now there's no question about improvement of the results because the results are always good if learners are able to explore and research on their own. And also it facilitates the collaboration in terms of learners. So they are able to share with their peers, even in other institutions. This is very important. Unlike in our days whereby we were able to meet the computer at a university. But now, learners at a tender age, they are able to make research, referencing bibliography, like in a university standard.
It remains to be seen if access to broadband will be included as a basic human right in tomorrow's society. Ayanda Sowazi for Eye on Gauteng, Johannesburg.
Now joining us in studio is the Gauteng MEC for Finance, Mr. Mandla Nkomfe, the Chief Technology Officer for BWired, Mr. Willie Olivier, and the Chief Executive Officer of Cloudseed, which are in charge of Gauteng Online, Mr. James Ainslie. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to Eye on Gauteng.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we have the finance man and we have two of the computer people. You guys must be quite happy to be sitting in this situation.
Certainly.
He's got all the money. MEC, speaking about money and speaking about your provincial government's rollout program with ICT, the ICT summit was held in Gallagher Estate, and there were resolutions and the conclusions that you've came up to. Do you want to just talk us through the ICT summit resolutions and broadband going forward for the Gauteng province? What are the visions?
No, thank you very much. Can I start by congratulating the station on its 5th anniversary, and I'm sure there's a long way to go. Our summit that we convened last week had a number of aims. Firstly, just to come out as government to link up with the industry, particularly the private sector, to say here we are a smart province, we want to develop a digital economy in Gauteng. There are a set of things that we need to do, and on the basis of that, we need a partnership with the private sector. and also ensure what is outside in space, in terms of what's happening in industry and all that. The essential issue for us is to connect government so that we are a connected government. And we have to do that by trying to sort out what I would call the demand side, not so much the supply side, because in my view, that's sorted out. And that's basically to look at broadband, and that's looking at internet penetration. Now, broadband is important for us as government, because firstly, if you look at the country as a whole, the penetration is very low, 12–13%, and we are an engine of the economy. So we've got to deal with the issue. Secondly, there are limitations, because the private sector would sometimes pick and choose where to go. So we've got to come in there where there is a market failure and actually ensure that the last mile is there, and internet penetration, broadband, the costs thereof are actually reduced significantly. Now, if I may just speak about maybe 4 areas in terms of broadband. One would be around, say, government efficiency, because we want to drive the processes fairly well there. Secondly, is about being an economic enabler, looking at the value chain in general terms, what small, medium enterprises can do, economic growth, it's one thing. Knowledge creation is another pillar, because at the end, we've got to be a smart province, but an information-based province. Information society is important for us. And lastly, universal access. Private sector can't do that, but we've got public policy imperatives to be able to do that. So the effect of that should be the uptake of internet, broadband, and all that to a significant scale, so that we are wired back to back in many ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that broad overview, MEC. Let's bring Willie in. Willie, your company is involved in the Joburg Broadband Network project. You are working on a system that's going to wire the city by next year, and it's a first for Africa. Really exciting times. Just tell us about the scope of your project.
Perfect. We kicked off a project together with the government, the greater city of Johannesburg. The aim is to create the first smart city concept throughout the Africa continent. And currently we're in our 3rd year of rollout. We should be live and completed by end of May 2013. And basically what we want to do is we want to become the de facto fiber network for the greater city of Johannesburg.
What does it mean when you say a smart city? Because apparently it's a first in Africa. No other city in Africa is smart as such, and Johannesburg is in the smart province. So please go ahead and enlighten us.
As the MEC said, and he pointed out quite correctly, we need government intervention. So the government stepped in, they came up with an idea to wire the entire city, and that will enable us to give back to the community. It means connecting of people, connecting of schools, and ensuring that everybody else has got a internet connectivity at home. So
and my producers enjoyed going for the trip, seeing how you guys actually dig in and getting those fibers down. James, your company Cloudseed is in charge of Gauteng Online. Gauteng Online connects 1,600 schools more or less. Kids in the public school that have access to internet. That's got to be powerful.
Yeah, it's incredibly disruptive. It's amazing to see how kids take up the burden of learning, for them the honor of learning, when they operate in an enabled environment. But schools are a bridge not just to education but to the community as a whole. So the vision for Gauteng Online was always beyond just the schools. Yes, it is a learning project, and we work very closely in partnership with the Department of Finance and Education. But it's the vision was to enable the communities around the schools as well, and that's where the significant penetration is.
What does e-learning mean?
E-learning is the facilitation of traditional content through technology. It's not computer literacy. It's learning curriculum material in an enabled environment.
And these kids have the access to internet. They've got email addresses.
Absolutely.
And what does this mean for them? Access to the internet. in context of their learning?
In some of the communities that we provide services to, children have to walk kilometers to get access to libraries, and those libraries are often very small and insignificant. The availability of the internet and certainly at the scale to which we deliver it, I mean, there are communities where we provide 40, 50 megabits a second into a school. So the idea was always to leverage off that platform in providing ubiquitous broadband to the community at large.
Fantastic, doing great work. We'll obviously keep tabs and see how far you guys, you still want to roll out a further 600 labs across the province?
We've done 1,600. The entire ambit is 2,200 labs across the province. We're working with the Department of Finance and Education in conceptualizing disruptive technology, more mobile technology in the schools themselves, and we're excited about that.
Fantastic. MEC, you spoke in your introduction the link between economic prosperity and internet penetration levels. The recently ended G20 summit spoke about how governments need to be putting more money in that space in order to facilitate economic growth. Most people don't understand the connection between internet and economic growth. Perhaps if you could explain it to us, why is internet so important to economic growth?
I think at the center is the movement of goods and services. It's trade. And it has to be driven by information. So you would need internet, you would need broadband, because this is the world that we live in today. It's an information society. It's not so much an industrial society. So you've got to operate in an enabled environment. So if you take, for instance, the tourism sector, which I think in my view is actually developed fairly well. The whole process is actually online. You can do
booking
quite a lot
for your
tickets and all that. So it's faster, it enables quite a lot of things. But look at it at the value chain again. So it means somebody in Soweto or in Katlohong can be able to use this technology to be able to facilitate economies of scales, trade, and all that. So it's important in that sense. It's a driver of the economy, it's a driver of prosperity and all that, and everybody must be hooked in that.
Okay. Very quickly, Willie, before we go to the break, and I want to bring in James as well, sure. You are implementing a very fast network. I was speaking to your communications people. They said it's a 1 terabyte system, and it's all very Greek to me. But what does this mean? In terms of speed, in terms of,
Well, it basically means that we will be able to give the community and everybody that needs access at very high rates. So if we have a look at our network, it's a 1.2 terabits per second throughput, which means normally in the old days you used to get 64K and 128. Remember the old dial-ups?
The dial-ups.
That's now going to disappear. So we're hoping to at least have the minimum connection of 100 megabits per second to anybody out there.
James, fast internet?
Yeah,
is it a silver bullet for all our problems?
Yes, it is. The reality is that, qualified, I think that the last mile is the biggest hurdle in Africa, and BWired are taking a very ambitious stab at the problem. But ultimately, the connection between the backbone and the user becomes paramount. And this is where we're being disruptive in our model. I'm sure you've heard all the hype around cloud in the industry at the moment. The reality is that without an effective cloud strategy, we're going to build legacy technology debt into our technological ecosystem. And the GDF have been visionary in taking a very strong leap forward before cloud was even hype in Africa. And certainly ours is the largest educational cloud of its kind in the Southern Hemisphere.
Wow.
And certainly that vision will be driven into the government public cloud as well.
Okay, fantastic. Well, it's all getting very technical in the studio, and we're going to talk more technical and more internet when we come back with Eye on Gauteng. Don't go away.